Hey guys, sorry that I can't be there today. As you know, I'm away on the student camp as I'm the first aid qualified fellow who has to come along, so I can't be here in the class. However, that doesn't mean you guys get to miss out on the work, and so I'm going to be presenting you a couple of videos that you will use to answer the worksheets that I have already provided for, okay? Now the first one, as you can probably see, is on Roman weaponry, so let's take a look at what we've got. Now the first two weapons that we're going to examine are the gladius and the spatha. Okay, now if we have a look at them, the one on the top is actually the gladius, and we'll notice that it's quite a fair bit shorter than the average sword that you would expect. The average length of the gladius would have been about 50 to 60 centimeters, and the reason for that was because it was primarily used as a thrusting or a stabbing sword. It's quite unlucky you guys don't get to see me in the classroom. I tend to walk up and down doing the stabbing motion, but another time maybe. It was primarily made of iron. Sometimes the handle was made of wood. Now these are actually reconstructions, which is probably obvious because we don't have too many swords that look like this from the time. As you can see, it's got a nice long little lobby bit at the end that you can use to hold, and it's quite sharp. It was good for swinging and for stabbing. Now the spatha was used mainly by the cavalry legions in the early periods, from about 1 BC and before, and from about the AD period it became the main sword of the legionnaires. The reason for this was because they stopped relying on the core infantrymen and started relying on more individual fast movements. So yes, your gladius was the primary weapon of the early legions, whereas the spatha was the primary weapon of the legionnaires of late. Now, if we're moving on, we have the pugio. Now, the pugio is a dagger sort of thing, and well, that's all there really is to it. It's a sidearm that was if you lost your other weapon in battle. Now, as we can see here, this too was obviously made of iron, a singular thing, probably clasped around the top here. We have the scabbard, they're made of the same material. Okay, moving on. Now we have the hasta and the pilum. Now these were the primary spears here. I've got an image that has a couple of them. These three down the bottom, if you have a look, are the actual hasta. Now they are long thrusting spears. They're designed to be held with one, sometimes two hands, and these ones don't bend or break. They just stab straight into the enemy. You would often use these with the shield. These were commonly used by the hastati in the earlier periods until they were replaced those with the gladiuses, and commonly used by the triarii, which of course we will discuss later. Now if we look up at the top, in fact we'll skip to the next image because it's actually a better view of it. The pilum, as you can see here, is a long sharp device, a long javelin, and this was thrown into the enemy before the actual battle. Now if you have a look here, the shaft is actually quite thick and solid, but this little bit here is actually quite thin. Now the idea was that this thin bit would pierce through the shield and then bend, the weight of this part forcing it to bend down, which basically makes the shield extremely unwieldy and would cause them to have to drop it, which means that you've got a Roman infantryman walking up against a person who's only got a sword. Still dangerous, but not as dangerous as they would be if they also had the shield. Now, of course, the Romans would also use bows and darts, but these aren't exactly particular to them. They were the regular composite bow, and they would have a couple of throwing darts that were quite dangerous. Okay, so in summation of the points, the gladius was the primary sword of the legion. It was short and mainly used for thrusting in conjunction with the scutum, which is the shield. The spatha was a longer version of the gladius, mainly used by the cavalry in the early millennia, before being adopted by the legionnaires later on. The pugio was a small sidearm, about the size of a dagger. The hasta was a long thrusting spear used in the early formations of the Roman legions. The pilum was a short javelin that was designed to make the enemy's shield unwieldy by twisting out of shape after piercing it. The Romans also used darts and composite bows as weapon. You may now take the time to fill out your information sheet. I would suggest you go back over the information and view this video again. Thank you.